Hello, everyone. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Christina, and we are the Connected in Glass podcast.
Every week, we will feature interviews with glass artists who speak to their creative processes and overcoming challenges.
These conversations are real and raw. We hope that by sharing these stories, you're able to find some connection and know that you're not alone. We just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to our podcast. We're super passionate about this project and work for hours every week to bring you this content. So if you'd like to help support us, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/connectedinglass. Also, please consider joining our Facebook group, Connected in Glass Community, where we continue the conversations from these episodes. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we're interviewing Amanda Gundy. Amanda is from Rye, New York, and is the owner and director at Noka Glass School. She's been working with glass since 2004.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We're so excited to get to know you. First, we want to learn a little bit more about you, maybe just skip the glass part of your life for now. So tell us where you live, what you enjoy besides glass, kind of get into what you do for a living and how you got into working with glass.
Yeah, sure. I was raised in Rye, New York, outside of New York City. Kind of come from a family of doctors. So art was never kind of an obvious career path for me. I come from a very artistic family, but it was always embraced as more of a hobby, kind of like a spiritual thing, rather than a career path. So I kind of entered into this world kicking and screaming, this world of glass. I went to Hamilton College, just regular old liberal arts college. And upon deciding a major, I chose art. I was always the kid that was like manipulating things. I don't want to say artsy because it wasn't really that. I was like, my mom will tell you, like, I was the kid that was like, I wonder what would happen if I cut a hole in these pillows or carved my name in the coffee table. I was always like manipulating things around me. Also really liked, drawing and painting. So I got hooked with photography and ceramics in college. And on my very last week of college, I went to my professor's house for a pizza party, end of the year pizza party. And he had a little glass shop set up. And it was the first time, other than maybe on TV a couple times, it was the first time I saw glass blowing. He told me, he showed us how to pull stringers. He blew something pretty cool. And then he showed us how to pull stringers, and he kind of grabbed a stringer and handed me the tweezers and was like, run. And I was like, what? Where? He was like, anywhere. And I ran and ended up crossing the street, and like a truck came and ran through the stringer. It was like, and then like my mind was just like, and after leaving college, I within weeks was signed up for a little weekend workshop. And that brings me up to, I guess I skipped over like anything besides glass art. I just went right for what brought me to glass. But yeah, that's kind of where I come from. And that was my first experience.
And so you're leaving college and you're focused on ceramics and photography, and then you learn about glass. Do you continue pursuing a career with ceramics and photography, or did you like get a side job, or did you just drop everything and just jump right into the glass?
Well, I got a side job. I started waitressing. I think we all know that glass is a pretty unaffordable hobby. But I just knew I had to keep doing it. I didn't really know where it was taking me. I just knew I had to keep trying it. And every experience with it was that much better. I ended up finding Urban Glass because that was kind of the closest shop to me at the time. I actually came up to Massachusetts for my very first weekend workshop. I like rented a hotel room, ended up the only person in the class. So it was like a weekend long private lesson at Simple Syrup Studios, which was in Brockton at the time. And now it's closed, unfortunately. And people are always asking me, people around here are like, oh, who was your instructor? I probably knew them. And for the life of me, I don't remember. I don't remember anything about that weekend except the class at all. And I think of that sometimes because I'm like, oh, I wonder how many students I've taught who like couldn't remember my name to save their life, but they just remember this like awesome experience. Anyway, I found my way to urban glass, quickly realizing this hobby wasn't a sustainable hobby. I became a technician there, assisted artist, and yeah, I was there for about 4 years before I had to move away. So then I moved away after I got married, and then I found myself at Corning a lot, kind of just taking classes where I could, getting scholarships where I could, TAing where I could.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about you outside of glass. You're married, you're a mom, you're sitting in your greenhouse right now. So tell us just a little bit of that side of you.
Yeah, sure. Well, that side of me right now is like front and center because, talk about imposter syndrome. I'm on this podcast about glass blowing and I haven't gathered in a year, which is just like heartbreaking. But yeah, I live in Wakefield, Massachusetts. My husband and I got married in 2008, kind of bounced around a bit, landed outside of Boston so he could work at Northeastern University. We bought this house 2.5 years ago. I have a 5-year-old, or sorry, 5 3/4. She would correct me. And I have a 10-month-old son. So they keep me busy. This year has just been a year, a year of just like isolation and second guessing and just like identities being taken away. But yeah, we love our house. We have this little greenhouse. We have a nice vegetable garden. It's good.
Okay, so I know that glass hasn't been quite such a major day-to-day part of your life right now, especially like with being a new mom and with COVID. But can you tell us about where you are right now as a business owner and how you got there? And I'm also wondering, as you started doing glass, did you know right away that you were going to be a teacher, or did you just do that because that was a way for you to get your hands on it?
No, that's a great question. Because specifically, I don't think teaching, especially glass, is for everyone. I stumbled into it as a student in a class. There was another student there who probably shouldn't have been enrolled in the class we were in. It was a very technique heavy, Reticello class. And this guy had just kind of learned how to gather. So he was kind of like left to his own devices. And I just found myself really enjoying, like, he we were there learning how to do this like amazing process, but he really didn't know how to walk himself through making a cup. And I walked him through it. And I ended up working with him a lot that week, and not feeling like it was taking away from me. I felt like it was actually making me a better glass blower, just like needing to find the way to describe something to him specifically, might have been a little different than the way it was described to me. Might have been a little different the way like some other instructor described it. But just like finding the language to speak to a particular human made me better at understanding the material. So I got really hooked to teaching like too early. I really was not a proficient glass blower yet. But I kind of kept getting little like TA gigs, it was easier to kind of run under the radar and like not really know everything, but like just enough to kind of get the students to know that you know more than them and to be able to help them. And then on my second trip to Corning, I was watching Bill Gudemrath work. He was teaching a class like in the opposite studio. And, I approached him and just said that I really liked the way he was teaching and that I really enjoyed teaching myself. And that I ever could get an opportunity to come work with him, then I would love it. And he said, "Hey, take my class first." And I said, "Okay." And I took his class, and then I TA'd for him about a year later. And yeah, him and Amy, so Bill Gudenrath and Amy Schwartz at the studio at the Corning Museum of Glass really were the first people to kind of take a chance on me. I think within a year or maybe a year and a half of TAing for him, they offered me my own class. And at that point, I had never taught a class by myself. So they were like really kind of taking a risk on me, and it was just the best. And I just wanted to do it all the time. And if you had asked me 10 years ago what I would want to be doing, I would tell you that I'd want to have my own glass school, making glass blowers. And yeah, so here I am. Look at that.
So how did that opportunity come to you? You're in New York, like 4 or 5 hours away from where you live now. How did this work out?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. It was kind of like the right time, right place scenario. I started working at Noka around 2011, shortly after I moved to the area. I found it, and I came and talked to them, and started working with Jesse Rassid pretty closely, and TAing for a lot of his classes, and then teaching some of his classes. And so when he made the decision to leave, he approached me with the school. He needed someone to take over after he left. So yeah, right place, right time. I don't know if I would have called it that at the time. It took me a really long time to figure out whether it was a blessing or a curse. I was he approached me when I had a 6-week-old. So I was like, not in my right head. But it worked out. We have a really great community. Noka runs out of Almost Perfect Glass in Cambridge. So it's not like its own entity. It's kind of like a renter in the shop. But the shop has such a great community of artists. And it's run by Andy Magdans and Susan Shapiro Magdans. And yeah, it's great.
That's really interesting. So do you just kind of are able to come in and work out of the studio at like an hourly rate? You're not responsible for maintaining or managing any of the equipment or anything like that? Because it sounds like you have those skills too from back at Urban, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of it's kind of a group effort on that front. But yes, you are correct. Like if, I am not technically in charge of the furnace. Like for example, Andy does all the maintenance. So it's a really great scenario in that respect.
Can you, for the people that don't know anything about Noka, can you kind of tell them a little bit about your business model and what you have to offer, and maybe about the group of people that you've collected through it?
Sure. We run probably our biggest pride and joy is probably our 6-week classes that we usually run 5.5 of every year. We usually kind of slow down in the summer. And of course, I'm not talking about this year. This year was, something else. But usually we run about 5.5, 6-week sessions, Mondays through Friday nights in the evening, so that people with day jobs can come take the class. We'll have our beginner class, our kind of advanced beginners, like people who are like ready to start playing around. People who have gathered before. We have those on Monday night. Tuesday is intermediate. Wednesday and Thursday are advanced. And then sometimes we'll run a Friday session that's like beginners. And those are just really fun because we choose a different theme for every session. One session, the advanced beginner class will be Roman glass, and they'll have a lot of fun trying to figure out and fail miserably and be awesome at Roman bottles. for the 6 weeks. Or the advanced class will do like a Venetian class or a Marini class. And it's really fun for us as instructors to come up with those different classes. It gives us an opportunity to play with something maybe we normally wouldn't. Right before the pandemic hit, I was teaching a Marini class, which is just so outside of my comfort zone. But it was so much fun, and the students didn't know that. Well, now they do, but yeah.
Can you tell us what else happens outside of the studio space? So you're working there at night. Are they just doing renters, or do they have a whole bunch of other kind of businesses working out of it too?
Yeah, during the day, it's mostly production. So Andy sells his work various places, but mostly out of Martha's Vineyard Glass, which is another kind of our sister studio that he also owns. So 3 days of the week, he'll be running production. I work on it. Well, last year and previous years, I was working on his team along with several of the other artists in the studio. Alongside him, maybe there'll be a private lesson going on. Maybe there'll be just some renters that are hobbyists, or stuff like that during the day. Same thing on weekends. It's either people who like work day jobs during the week and want to rent on the weekends. We also do weekend workshops for true beginners. We usually run them every other weekend. So like a paperweight workshop here, a cup workshop there, stuff like that, ornaments around the holidays. So it's always bustling. Right before the pandemic, like I had never seen, our schedule was just baffling to look at. Like it was filled, totally filled.
So you're saying probably like 3 workstations going on, but all working out of one furnace, right? It's a continuous melt furnace.
It is, yeah. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, that's the only way that would work with that schedule. Yeah.
So do you mostly see yourself as a teacher, or let's say that it's not COVID times and you don't have an infant, talk about it. Like, do you pursue different skills and styles on your own, or do you have a line of products that you make, or do you just kind of do a little bit of everything?
I do like on my own, I do mostly production stuff, like functional barware, bowls, stuff like that. I like the repetitive nature of it. I like to, make one thing pretty good and then just try to make it better and make it better and make it better. I do enjoy like more conceptual stuff. I just don't have a lot of time for it in recent years. But what I did like about taking over the school is kind of it opened the door for, I was no longer depending on income from like sales of my pieces. So, I would always reserve 1 day a week for blowing glass for myself. And whether it was a day of cups, because I'm like working as a teacher and like running the school from day to day, I could like come in and make cups and be like, oh, hey, I like these 6. I'm going to take these ones home, like keep them or like give them away. It wasn't such a, the pressure to sell kind of lifted. And because of that, I was actually playing with more techniques. I wasn't stuck on something that like, well, that's sellable. If it was like fun and interesting to try, I would try it. That's also another thing I love about teaching. You like read some weird technique in a book, or you like see it on Instagram and you're like, oh, I gotta try that. I'm gonna try it on Tuesday night next week and show my students. And then all of a sudden that becomes like, oh, I bet I can do it this way. And that turns into a body of work.
So how do you get into the mindset of teaching specifically? You seem to be like pretty natural at it, but I know there's like different ways of kind of getting in and out of being able to explain things to people.
I don't know, that part has always just kind of unfolded for me. I found that the more I thought about it ahead of time, the worse I would do. even still, like if I'm teaching a paperweight workshop on a weekend, there's this there's this like moment of dread right before it. I hate to say that, but like it's true. I just like I'm like, oh, like what if I like don't like what if they don't like me? What if I don't like them? What if this? What if that? And like and then the second we're going, it's just like all of that's gone, and it just, um it just unfolds naturally. So I guess I don't really do anything specific to get in any mindset. It's stuff that I'm always thinking about. Whenever you're working with glass, you're like, why is it doing that? Why am I doing, like, what did I do to just do that? Or, it's always something in the back of your head, and you just have to verbalize it. And then maybe verbalize it again in a different way if it didn't make sense the first time. Yeah.
And I was wondering, how do you advertise your business? Does it just naturally get customers because of the location and because they're like kind of finding you, or do you find there's a certain avenue that you're able to gather all these people coming in and out of your space?
Yeah, well, probably our original advertising was through the Cambridge Center for Adult Ed. We would list our weekend workshops in there. We're kind of on a little hiatus from that because they've been doing, not in-person classes. And I haven't even thought about trying to start it up again. But that always reached a certain number of people and would like pull them through the door, at least. Of course, nowadays, social media is a great way to get the word out there. You can just like click on a little button now to be like boost post, and it will just like go off into the ether and find people that might be interested nearby. So that's cool. I know I've definitely met a couple students who have said like, oh, I just got an ad on my Instagram feed, and that's how they found us. We're pretty lucky in this field because it's a pretty remarkable thing, glass blowing, so it just kind of like attracts people. I've even just sitting on this last year, kind of like with this dread of like, oh my god, is it all gonna just slip away? I get the emails that are like, hey, I'm interested, or like, I just watched Blown Away, like I've never knew this was a thing, like you're in Cambridge, I'm right down the street. And I'm always getting emails like that. And it like reminds me that like we're part of kind of this very special craft that is just always going to be enticing to people. So yeah, that's great part of what we do.
And so we're talking about all of this as if COVID didn't exist. Can you talk a little bit about how COVID changed things for you and maybe how you're trying to get through it?
Yeah. Oh man, don't you wish we could just go back and like be like, look, this is going to happen. It's going to take a good year. It'll be okay. I just think back to like the time when it was like 2 weeks. And then it was like, oh my God, this is going to be longer than 2 weeks. Not knowing how to make decisions anymore. And yeah, it was really shook things up. I mean, glass blowing in general, but especially teaching glass blowing is not equipped for like socially distanced measures. I know I kept my eye out on Instagram, watching other shops kind of slowly bring it back into the fold, but we never felt comfortable with it. This whole year, just at least beginner classes. We have not taught a beginner in over a year. It's heartbreaking to me because that's like my whole thing is getting those beginners through the door and like watching them like realize the magic they're a part of. And, maybe they go away and just are like, oh, this fantastic thing I did this one time. And then maybe they are now like my best friend that I go to Patty's with once a week and take classes like 3 days a week and teach for me. Like, students have turned into teachers. And having all of that be on hold has just been really tough. I got pregnant with my son before this all happened. So I kind of already knew this was going to be a tough year. But I felt like I had everything I needed in place, like I worked really hard to get Noka to this place where like it felt like a finely tuned machine that could run. For the longest time, it was I couldn't walk away from it. I couldn't go home and forget about it. I could, it was like a limb. It was like leaving a limb behind in Cambridge. But slowly, after like learning how to delegate and like having just an amazing team of people that, can teach really well and also understood like the values that I have, and I could walk away and like know whatever class was going on was going perfectly, and if not, they would give me a call. So I worked really hard to get it to that place where once I had the baby, I could kind of know that everything was fine. And then everything was just not fine. And it all stopped. So, the best we can do is just, I know things are looking up, which is great. I have my first dose tomorrow. Very excited, very hopeful. And I'm already getting lots of inquiries about when our class is starting up. We kind of made the decision that we're going to stick with things the way they are, which is just, our veteran renters, our veteran students who are kind of equipped to come in on their own, or that we know really well and we can, give a private lesson to. We're doing that right now, but we're down to 2 stations. We don't feel comfortable doing more than 2 right now. And we just decided that we're not going to start up regular classes until the fall. So yeah, at that point, it will be a year and a half of pretty slow going.
So Christina and I aren't parents, but we know a lot of the people that listen are. And one of our favorite questions, one of the first ladies that we interviewed talked about this terrible mom guilt that she feels every time she does something for herself or she steps away from her kids. Can you talk a little bit about how you found a balance with that, with the mom guilt and running a business at the same time?
Yeah. And I'm, just full disclosure, not going to even try to pretend that I have that totally figured out yet. But yes, that is real. Like life turns into like, even so much as like getting in the shower can feel guilty. Like, I don't, this 10 minutes away is like, somebody needs me somewhere. And it was a really, really big struggle with me the first time around, simply because it went hand in hand with taking over the school. By the time Eloise, my daughter, was 1, I was a signed owner for Noka. So it was almost like I had another baby right away, which was never my intention. As you can see, I waited 5 years for the second one. But yes, it was hard because Noka was a baby. My baby was a baby. If I wasn't at Noka, I was feeling bad that, I wasn't the kind of owner that was like always there. If I was there, I was really worrying about whatever was happening back home. And the way, I don't know, I just think trusting other people is like the key. Once I found a really good school, a really good daycare situation for Eloise, I realized I could go a little longer during the day without worrying about her. Trusting that my husband could handle bedtime and dinner without me. And even though I know he can, there's like this part of me that's like, but I should be doing it. Then that made it easier to be teaching class at night and not being home. But yeah, it's always a struggle. And I guess, this year, as hard as it was, like a silver lining for me was that the days where I had to pick between my kids and my work were very few this year. So it was kind of a different type of maternity leave than I had last time. Not that I get maternity leave, but you know what I mean? It was, last time it was just constant picking between one or the other. And this time I got to enjoy my son a little bit more, even though it was fraught with pandemic anxiety and just like a whole different, a different set of stresses entirely. But yeah, mom guilt is real. It's tough. And, being a parent just changes everything. Like you just have your like heart outside your body, like running around. And you're like, gotta protect it.
I can't even imagine being like giving birth and having a new baby during all of like the beginnings of all of this. That must have been so scary.
Yeah, it was a little bit wild. Yeah. Yeah, I remember when my doctor told me to like stop coming in for appointments. I was like, what? Like, what? I said to my husband, I was like, are we gonna have to get like a kiddie pool for me to have a baby in the backyard? Like, this is getting crazy. That didn't happen. But yeah, it was not what I planned. Let's just put it that way.
You mentioned earlier talking about imposter syndrome. And that's something that definitely is a recurring theme in this podcast for sure. Do you have anything to kind of say about your experience with it or ways that you cope with it?
It's such a layered question just because it comes back to like worrying what other people think. And as much as we try, like we're always going to worry a little bit. I mean, even just as artists needing to sell a thing, like you have to worry what someone's going to think of it, right? Because if someone has to like it and buy it, stuff like that. But I think it's so. I've found that sometimes I'm like speaking about my experiences. I'm like, wow, it sounds really cool. Like this sounds really good on paper. Like I can really make this sound like I've got my ish together. And but I don't feel like I do. So it can be very, very confusing. And there's probably always going to be someone out there that like looks at you and maybe thinks that like, oh well, how's she running a glass blowing school? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Just as long as what you're doing is making you happy, then just try not to worry about it. And, it'll creep up on you, that feeling of being an imposter. But as long as what you're doing is making you happy, you're not hurting anyone. Keep on keeping on.
So I really liked that story when you told us about Bill and his wife and about how they mentored you and kind of took a chance on you. Do you have any other stories or experiences with mentors or being a mentor that you could pass on that people could learn from?
Well, I guess that I definitely wouldn't want to leave out, if I'm talking about mentors, I would, Jesse Rassid, who used to own Noka Glass School, kind of changed the way I teach. And for that, like, I'm very grateful. He was kind of the first one that opened my eyes to looking at the human instead of the glass. Like, I feel like in the past, I'd be like, oh, what's going wrong? Why is this happening? Because you're doing it wrong. Not that I would say it like that, but and all of a sudden he was like, oh, like, look at your elbow, it needs to be out. And like, he was very much about, body positioning and stuff. And that was just something that was never really occurred to me much. So he changed the way I teach, and made me a much better teacher, especially with beginners. Andy Magdan's at the studio has been like just a fantastic person to work for and watch. He kind of like shows me what it is to run a studio and kind of mentor everyone around you. It's like simultaneously, and have fun doing it. And so I'm like definitely grateful for him. I hope I've mentored people. That seems like a funnier one to talk about for some reason, because I don't want to be presumptuous, I guess. But it's always fun to like I used to go to Corning a lot. I've taught there. I can't remember how many times. I think I've done 10 1-week classes over the course of the last 10 years. And, bringing a TA along is always like a lot of fun because, TAs, it's a thankless job. Like you don't get paid a lot or whatever, but, and you have to work a lot, but you can kind of be at the beginning of your game. And it feels like I remember when I was brought there as a TA for the first time, it just felt like such an amazing, place to take off from. So it always felt really, really great bringing someone new there. And, oftentimes I would bring that person again and again a few times. Every time I brought someone new felt really good and felt like I was opening their eyes to this great community at Corning.
Is there anything else that you want to tell people that are listening?
I hope you guys are all happy and hanging in there. It's hard to know. Hard to know where we're going to go from here, and hope you're at least doing something every day that makes you happy, either whether you're making a living at it or making a living doing something that's tolerable so that you can do something that makes you happy.
Thank you so much for sharing all your personal stories and your perspective. We really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Connected in Glass. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more information on the artists we interview and for updates on the podcast.